All right, I apologize for our technical difficulties there. Hopefully our internet's going to hold out for the rest of the time. And as the rest of the live show maybe is able to find us and get shuffled in here, we will get started here momentarily. I did save the question that I was answering, so Ken, if you are there and able to listen, I absolutely do have your question saved. I'm going to try to answer it the very best I can. I'll give you a moment. Hopefully you can catch up here and give you just a little bit of time. It's one of those things that our internet, some days it does really good and then others it just wants to really struggle. But hopefully with that, I have the stream restarted. You can jump on, you can join me, and hopefully we can get back to business here. And now I'll remind you, just a quick refresher. The question was, we had a sermon on Sunday on the Book of Life, and I preached partly out of Daniel chapter 12. And our question revolved around this matter in verse 1, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which shall standeth for the children of thy people, and go on from there. The question is, what is that time? What is the time that Michael shall stand up? And what I wanted to consider here is, how is the language meant to be understood? Is this a order of events that Michael shall stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people? Then after Michael stands up, there shall be a time of trouble. Then after that, at that same time, then thy people shall be delivered, and everyone that shall be found written in the book of life. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall wake up, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting content. And then they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. There's a lot of events going on. There's a lot of events taking place here in these couple of verses in Daniel chapter 12. And what we're trying to figure out is, where does Michael standing up fit in? There's a couple of options when it comes to our eschatology. There is the option, the possibility that Michael is standing up to lead the remnant of Israel into the wilderness. Now let's consider that if we go to Revelation, and give me just a moment, Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12 speaks of Israel going into the wilderness. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. This woman is Israel. This is figurative language, and we know this because the Bible really is clear on the matter. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, did cast them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. This is obviously figurative language, but it's describing the birth of Christ, and the woman being Israel. And the woman fled into the wilderness. The woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Now, who is they? I think we could probably imagine they would maybe be the angels, the servants of God. And look and see, and there was a war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was there a place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. What is interesting here is the order of events that are taking place. We have Michael mentioned here in Revelation chapter 12. We have Michael mentioned here in Daniel chapter 12. Interesting parallel there. Michael both in chapter 12 here. That's probably just a coincidence, but interesting. And we have to consider, when are these things taking place concerning Michael, because Michael is mentioned here. And let's go back down here. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. Now, the dragon would be Satan, but what's interesting is I see Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and at that time shall Michael stand up. Is this Michael standing up here, potentially Michael standing up to fight Satan, to stand against him? And the dragon and fought his angels. Now, as we go down here, this battle results in Satan being cast into the earth. He is not able to access heaven. And we have to make sure that we pay attention to the events and consider this matter, because what needs to happen, according to the Bible, is there needs to be a point in which the Antichrist sets himself up on the throne. Now, what's interesting is the Antichrist is Satan embodied in the flesh. You really kind of have an unholy trinity there between Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. You have the Father, the unholy Father, the unholy Son, and this unholy Spirit, this unholy ghost. And they're going to mimic God in that way. And what we have to consider here is when Satan is cast down, is this the beginning of the tribulation? And there probably is a pretty consistent teaching on this matter. I am not somebody who I haven't taught through Revelation yet. I've read a lot of Revelation. As far as the exact order of eschatology, it's a matter that I need to work on to give you my specific position on these order of events, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on it as I'm reading this. I don't think that this is I think this is a potentially future event, is what I'm seeing right here. There are some that would maybe hold that Satan is bound right now and he is to be loosed in the future. I don't know if I would hold to that view, because it does seem like, when does this war get waged? When does Satan get cast out of heaven permanently and onto the earth? I don't know if we can build a clear teaching undeniably that this has already occurred. Now, with that being said, I don't know that we can teach that Satan's being cast out of heaven and into the earth is undeniably a future event. It is challenging one way or the other. I think you're going to face challenges trying to nail down the order of events here, because Satan is described as, in the Bible, he's the prince, the power of the air, the god of this age, prowls the earth like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Do we interpret that to be that Satan no longer has any access to heaven, and now he is just purely condemned to the earth? Or do we understand it as, yes, he can be on the earth and he can be engaging in those ways, but the future battle for heaven itself has yet to unfold? If it has already taken place, when? Do we go back into the time of the Old Testament for that to have taken place? Do we say it was sometime during the life of Christ? Was it somehow when Jesus was crucified that this war took place? I just don't know if you can speak with certainty on the matter. Now, I guarantee you there's pastors, theologians, Bible teachers who will teach with precision that this war for heaven already took place. It took place at this time. And maybe they have a compelling argument. I tend to leave this more to future matters. I just don't know that I can say specifically that it took place in the past. And because I can't say that there is a specific time in the past when this happened, I just gravitate towards this being more of a future event. We have verse 12. It says, "Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea." See, this language right here sounds so much like the tribulation, because it's woe unto the earth. I would not say woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. Not right now. I think that I would say rejoice, because there is an amazing offer of grace and peace to you. So this idea, woe to the earth and to the sea, for the devil is come unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. This all sounds like tribulation to me. So if this is tribulation, this battle right here, let me go up a little bit further though. This battle right here between Michael and the angels, this sounds like it has to be a future event that is yet to unfold. And it's going to take place. That's my understanding. That's my position on that. Now, what's interesting is you have to understand Revelation is not a chronological book. It goes, I mean, it will establish the kingdom and not so maybe as great a detail as 19, 20, and 21, but the kingdom will be established, make no mistake, in Revelation, like Revelation chapter 12, but then it goes back in time again. You see that a number of times. The mountains are moved from their place, and then yet you get a few chapters later, then there's mountains again. You just have to understand that Revelation is not entirely by the order of events. It will tell part of the future, part of the Revelation, the apocalypse events, and then it'll go back in time and retell it from some other angles. And that's what you have in Revelation chapter 12, because in Revelation chapter 12, chapter 10 is the establishment of the kingdom. "And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." And so I think that you have, now has come salvation and strength. Now maybe you could read that potentially as saying, well, now these events are unfolding, the tribulation's about to happen, so salvation and strength in the kingdom is coming. I don't know. That seems pretty clear as an announcement of triumph. "And the accuser is cast down." That almost sounds like the bottomless pit to me. But maybe you could argue no, because then you still have this matter right here of Satan coming down to earth and knowing that he has a short time. That's an interesting discussion. And as I'm reading it here, seeing the matter of cast out into the earth, cast out, maybe I'm already talking myself into saying, no, maybe this is referring just in the matter of the heavens, and then you have the matter of him being cast down to the earth. "And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time from the face of the serpent." This would be the great tribulation, from my understanding. This would be the second half of the tribulation, those 7 years. "And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood." Here's what I'm going to go with. Putting the order of events in Revelation 12 here is somewhat challenging. It is difficult, because I just don't want to discount this right here. The salvation has come and strength in the kingdom of our God as potentially maybe jumping forward to when the kingdom is established. But before then, here's some of the events that unfold on earth. But I will say this, as I read this matter of, "And at that time shall Michael stand up," and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, this seems to be the parallel to me, that you've got Michael standing up, Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the casting of Satan out of heaven onto the earth is the start of that great tribulation. And so that's where I'm going to go with that matter. I think that, and maybe it could be that Michael also leads Israel into the wilderness, but it seems to me to parallel him standing up and fighting against Satan, because guess what? What immediately happens after he stands up or after he fights Satan? There shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation even to that same time. And what do you have? And the great dragon cast out, he was cast under the earth, and the devil is come unto you having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. That would be my position on that. Hopefully that at least gives you my thoughts on the matter there, Ken, as we discuss those issues of the matter of Michael. I think that if we have Michael show up there in Revelation 12, and Daniel mentions Michael, and the events seem to align, that's where I'm going to go. One of these days I'm going to do a verse by verse through Revelation. It's just going to take some time to nail all that down. Not necessarily the theology so much, but nailing the timing down. Like, when should I do it? Should I do it on a Wednesday night? Should I do it on a Sunday night? It takes a lot. Because Revelation for me to preach through it, it's going to be a 40 session study. Maybe a little. I may be able to cut it down, but it'll be a lot. It'll be a year's worth for sure. Hey, good. Yeah, Ken got to listen to it and said thanks. That makes much more sense. Good. I'm glad it helped. And I know that I was kind of reading a whole bunch of stuff and thinking out loud there, but that was me processing it as I was going through, trying to put those two things together. It's amazing, though. Daniel is the revelation of the Old Testament. That was one of the points I made in our sermon on the Book of Life. It's amazing to me how the Book of Revelation is not telling you stuff that is necessarily new. It's expounding on and putting it all together, the prophecies of the past, and really tying it all in. All right, now I don't have any questions right now. I don't have any built up in a bank right now. I've been able to catch up with all the questions, having Friday as a catch-up day. So if you want your questions answered, I can answer questions right now. So if you have one, you can submit it. You can type it into our chat box, and I'll answer it. I'll give you just a moment to see if you do want to submit a question, and then if not, I will get into some matters of politics and culture and whatnot. And also what I'll do is I will be checking the chat box in case we do get a question, and then I can answer it. So there's the plan for today. So if you have a theology question, be sure to submit it so I can respond to it. Okay? And with that, there we go. Now, let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about an article on Christianity Today. So if you have been following Shields and Arrows for the past 6 months or so, you know our favorite contributor to Christianity Today is Bonnie Kristen. And Bonnie Kristen has no idea who I am. It almost looks like Christian, so maybe because it's I-A-N at the end. But Bonnie is... I don't know her personally, but I like to use her first name just because it's funny. She's not a Trump fan, okay? To understand who Bonnie is, she does not like Trump. She probably was much more a fan of like Nikki Haley or somebody. I really don't know. She's not a leftist. She's a squishy evangelical. That's about the best way I can describe her. And she recently had an article on the ruling of the Supreme Court about presidential immunity. I've done a little bit more listening since yesterday, trying to get a better understanding, put my finger on the pulse of this matter. Let's talk a little bit about what Bonnie has to say, And then I'll share with you some more of my thoughts. I'll kind of expound on my concerns. It's one of those things, and I'm not crazy about it, the ruling on the Supreme Court, because I can see that there is a lot of potential to abuse it, but at the same time, I think it's pretty much the status quo. It's basically how things have been run for a while now. Now it's just kind of in writing. Let's look at this article here, though, before we go on. There is no president who is righteous. No, not one. Let's see that a little bit of play on Romans chapter 3, which is actually quoting from Psalms. A government built on the assumptions of its leaders' good character is a government badly built. And so here we go. Trump is not above the law. Trump is orange bad man who's orange and bad. The Supreme Court's Monday ruling on presidential immunity from criminal prosecution did not offer boundless endorsement of the executive office holder's prerogative to do whatever he wants without fear of consequence. This is true. The left, was panicking. They're panicking because Biden is a terrible candidate and they're afraid they're going to lose in November. Maybe they will. I'm always holding out room for pessimism, though. So they're panicking. They don't want Trump in office, and so they're using this Supreme Court ruling as an excuse. The ruling by the Supreme Court grants immunity as long as the president is conducting official business. That is the most plain and basic statement I can say. And it's kind of funny because official business is, well, what the president is legally allowed to do. It's official business. If he uses his powers as the commander-in-chief to order an airstrike, that's a part of his official business. Now, the left is claiming, but if he orders that airstrike on civilians, an American citizen, then he's immune. The president being allowed to target a U.S. citizen, I don't think falls under that same protection. So what they're trying to do is make a big deal about it, saying, oh, now President Trump, if he wins, he can do whatever he wants. It's funny, they're not, but apparently they believe Biden is as pure as the driven snow. So Biden is going to be so reserved he will not access it, even though right now under that ruling, according to the leftists, that this ruling now gives the president the power of the king. Biden, if he wanted to, could drop a bomb on Donald Trump and then just declare himself as the ruler of all time. But Biden hasn't done that because he knows that he can't. He knows that that's not really what the ruling says. But this is what Bonnie says. But it came far too close. So this ruling does give the president too much immunity, holding that the Constitution entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. He is further entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. The court's majority continued, though there's no immunity for unofficial acts. There's a whole bunch of minutia when it comes to this ruling, and there's a whole lot of technical details that you can probably get into and start talking about and go above my head. Here's my thoughts on this entire ruling by the Supreme Court. They may have came out with an official statement, but essentially their official statement is the status quo. I think that we can all agree that presidents have enjoyed the luxury of a lot of immunity for a very long time, even if it's not written in a Supreme Court ruling, because there's been a lot of things that have taken place that presidents have done that you can say at the very least, are shady. How about Obama having his Department of Justice, having the FBI spy on Donald Trump's campaign? That was a thing that happened, but we're pretending like that's okay. Because apparently it is, because he had presidential immunity. This is the status quo. I don't see anything about the Supreme Court ruling that changes anything. It's always been like this. There's been a lot of presidents, or even just politicians in general, that have operated on the fringes of the rules, and on a technicality, maybe they aren't breaking the law, but everybody looks at that and says, that's really, really... you are just tiptoeing on the line. And nobody does anything because, hey, they're politicians. They play by different rules. We have always known that there are different rules for the elites. The idea of equal equal administration of the rules is absurd. It's absurd. It does not actually exist. We know that there are special treatment given to politicians, presidents, even celebrities to a degree. And so this Supreme Court ruling, I'm not saying that I'm crazy about it, but what I'm saying is it's kind of acknowledging what already existed. Now, in regards to Trump, I say, what did Trump actually do? What did he do that is justifiable for his crimes? I think a lot of people realize that his conduct during that time was, maybe some people didn't like it, but what did he do that you can say that was criminal in action? He was calling upon people to be able to do what he believed they had the power to do. He wasn't calling them to break the law. He was calling upon Pence to do what Pence had the scope of being able to do within his authority as vice president. He would talk to the governor of Georgia over matters of election. He was appealing to all the authorities. The Democratic Party is claiming that this is going to be used to give presidents absolute power. That's not true. And Trump may still be charged with some crimes that I'm not convinced that he actually committed. But once again, this idea, Bonnie just serves as another example of an evangelical who is against Trump. Now, she is not somebody who is necessarily a fan of Biden. She's not somebody who's necessarily a fan of Obama either. But what I'm telling you is, you got to look around and see what's going on. If you are somebody who's like Bonnie, who kind of has an idea, sympathy towards, I don't like Trump because Trump's bad and there's charges being brought against him, and it's terrible that the Supreme Court came out with this immunity ruling, even though it's only partial immunity for some things, and it's once again just basically the status quo, how it's always been done. Now it's just in writing. We are talking about the sitting president weaponizing his departments, his DOJ, against his political rival. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with Trump not being in office purely because he was targeted for political reasons? I think it's far more dangerous that you let Biden and his DOJ get away with prosecuting Trump than to not vote for Trump out of the principle of saying, well, I just don't want him to be the president because he did bad things and he was prosecuted, and so that is a very serious threat. It's way more dangerous. You have to realize voting for Trump is not voting for Trump. I think that's what people realized in 2016. That's one reason why Trump was able to win, because Trump made the election not about him. 2020, I don't know, Trump may have made it too much about him. But in 2016, Trump made the election about the people versus the elites. That's what this election is again. It's not about Trump. It's about what he stands for, what he represents. What he represents is the elite's deep-seated hatred towards conservatives. That's what it's about. It's the left's deep-seated hatred towards actual Americans that believe in the principles that this country was founded on. And so when you go to cast your ballot this year, you have to understand, you're voting yes for Donald Trump, but it's what it stands for. Are you going to let them get away with throwing political rivals in prison? Are you really going to let them do that? Because that speaks louder than anything else. Your non-vote for Trump is allowing these things to continue, and you're just going to encourage it. Because if they get away with prosecuting Donald Trump this time, and he doesn't win the presidency, guess what they're going to do to the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy? Because, after all, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They'll continue to do so. All right, there's my thoughts on that article from Bonnie. Come on now, Bonnie. One of these days, I'll have to get an interview with you. All right, here we go. I have another question, theology related. Nancy comes with me with a question. Jeremiah 17:13. Those that have forsaken the Lord, their names are written in the earth. Mark 8:6. Jesus stooped down and wrote in the earth when the Pharisees were testing him, possibly their names. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So Jeremiah 17:13. And Matthew Mark 8:6. Okay, so here we go. Let's analyze these things. So Jeremiah 17. Let's just go ahead and read verse 12. Or verse 10, I, the Lord, search the heart, I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. Does that sound like by grace through faith? Just to consider, let's just pause for a moment and camp on that. I know that's not the point of our question, but it's amazing to me how we will just overlook the Old Testament. Calvinist, covenant theologians, standard evangelicals that don't have any concept of us living in a different age, a mystery age. Do you ever read the Old Testament? Do you ever look at anything other than David and Goliath or the flood or Elijah praying for rain or the still small voice? Do you ever read verses like this? I, the Lord, search the heart and try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. Do you ever just read that? But this is what they'll do. They will answer and say, oh, the Lord God, He gives to every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. It's about our eternal rewards. But furthermore, a truly saved person, a truly saved person is going to have fruit in their life. He's going to have works. He's going to have doings. Can you just please stop reading yourself into every passage? Can you please stop taking Pauline doctrine and retro-inserting it into the Old Testament? Please just let it say what it says. I challenge you to go through Jeremiah and find anything that talks about by grace through faith, not of works. No wonder the Jewish people don't take us seriously. No wonder any seriously thinking people do not take us seriously, because the bulletin board headlining Christian doctrine is indefensible. It truly is. Because we ignore things like the Old Testament, and we can't see that there's a fundamental change between what God was doing then versus what God is doing now. As the partridge sitteth on eggs and hatcheth them not, so he that getteth riches and not by right shall leave them in the midst of his days, and at the end, his end shall be a fool. A glorious high throne from the beginning is the place of our sanctuary. A glorious high throne from the beginning is the place of our sanctuary. Oh, that's interesting right there. I could read that, and could this be foretelling of like when the New Jerusalem comes down from heaven? Because heaven would be where God's throne is, the place of our sanctuary, the New Jerusalem. It's interesting there. We could consider that. O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake thee shall be ashamed, and they that depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. So there's that line right there. So O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake thee shall be ashamed, and they that depart from me. Now, they that depart from me, that does sound like Israel, because we wouldn't say of a Gentile in the sense of a non-Jew, as departing from God, because we know from Ephesians, we were without God and without hope in the world. You can't depart from something if you were never there. We were never with God. We were never in a covenant with God. We were never affiliated with God. So I cannot say as a non-Jew that at any time I could depart from the Lord. For example, I cannot say that I have departed from the Grand Canyon. I've never been to the Grand Canyon. In order to depart from the Grand Canyon, I have to be there. So this line right here, they that depart from me, yeah, this is an Israel line completely. And they shall be written in the earth. Now, I also wonder, is this almost a parallel of the book of life? If you are with the Lord, you haven't departed from Him, your name is written in the book of life, whereas otherwise your name shall be written in the earth. Now, the word in the earth there, could this be in hell, in the grave, the lake of fire? Is that where your name goes? There's the book of life that's with the Lord, and then maybe there's some other writing, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. Heal me, O Lord, I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved, for thou art my praise. Let me go back a little bit further just to read a little bit more of this context. So it's, this chapter is a prophecy of the destruction that's going to be coming upon Israel. Oh, I'm in chapter 16. I apologize. There's chapter 17. The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron and with the point of a diamond. It is graven upon the table of their heart and upon the horns of your altars. Whilst their children remember their altars and their groves by the green. Still in the framework of the judgment that's going to come upon Judah. Thus saith the Lord, cursed be the man that trusteth in man and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord. Blessed is the man that trusteth in the Lord, whose hope the Lord is. For he shall be a tree planted by the waters that spreadeth out her roots. So there's the context there, talking about Judah, those that depart from the Lord. So let's go back to verse 13. Just trying to get some good context there. And did I look at the wrong verse? I had Mark 8:6 pulled up. Did you mean Mark 8:6, Nancy, or did you mean a different verse? Because that's feeding the 5,000. Let me find it. Is it, you're talking about John 8:6. John 8:6. Oh, yeah, the passage that modern scholars don't think should be in the Bible. Because the Codex Sinaiticus, the world's best, greatest ever Bible of all time, doesn't have it. All right. They say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned, but what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down with his finger, wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted himself up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. This is tough. There's been so much speculation about this passage and what Jesus wrote. The truth is we can't say for sure what he wrote because the Bible doesn't tell us. So we are left to speculate a little bit. We do know the facts. We know he wrote, and whatever he wrote, eventually the Pharisees were convicted and they left. There are some that speculate and say these Pharisees had been committing adultery with the woman too. And so Jesus wrote their names down. So they were guilty of it, and then they were ashamed and departed. Maybe Jesus was writing out their sins. I don't know. What's interesting to me is they brought the woman caught in adultery, which according to law would be punishment for death. Yet Jesus doesn't encourage them to carry out the law. I think we should stop for a moment and think why. Why is that? Why is the law not carried out upon this woman? I think if we consider Israel, just think of the Jewish people as a whole. They had time and time again sinned against God and was deserving of being wiped off the map. And they were deserving of God's wrath, God's judgment, and yet God again and again offered them forgiveness of their sins and repentance. I think you could maybe draw, and this may be the strongest correlation you have, at least in regards to Jesus not having them stone the woman, was she was serving as an example of Israel being, and it's almost really an adulterous woman, right? An adulterous wife. And you see that parallel drawn in the Old Testament scriptures. And yet, what did God do? God forgave and offered forgiveness again and again. Maybe Jesus was drawing that correlation there. So I think that's at least the sense or the meaning of it in that aspect. Now, what would he have written down? Could it have been a reference to Jeremiah 17:13? That their names, or at least they that depart from him, shall be written in the earth. It's an interesting theory there. I don't know how much, if that's really all we have to work with. I don't know how strong our argument is, how persuasive we can be. It's something, and that's what I appreciate about it. At least it's something. There's more credibility to this theory than, that they had been committing adultery with the woman too, or whatever other theories that are come up with. At least here, you're going with a biblical basis. So, out of all the theories that I've ever heard, I would be more sympathetic to this one, because at the very least, you have some kind of verse, some kind of scripture that you're referencing. So, that's better than others that lack any scriptural reference at all. And so, I'm just going to say, I don't know that we have the undeniable proof that this is what he did. He wrote their names down in the sand. But at least there is some scriptural reason for why you are supposing that and why you may want to hold to that view. What else would he have written? I don't know. Could he have been Could he have written down a quote from the Old Testament talking about comparing Israel to an adulterous woman? I don't know. I don't know what he wrote down. So I don't know if we have any other... Do we have that phrase written in the earth appear anywhere else in the Bible? Jeremiah. No, Jeremiah is really the only one that has that. But you did note kind of what I was thinking in that Revelation 17:13. It does kind of have a similarity to the book of life. There you have names written in the book of life, but then you have those written in the earth. I see that parallel, that correlation. And then over here, you also mentioned 2 Peter 3:12, the earth and all of its elements burn up. 2 Peter 3:12. Talking about the coming of the new heavens and the new earth, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. That's possible if your name is written in the earth and then the earth is destroyed, well, your name is blotted out. I find it interesting. I think it's a very interesting discussion. I just don't know how definitive we can be with that, how concrete the argument is, but it's an interesting proposal there, Nancy. And those are the only kind of questions you're going to get by, or you only get those kind of questions by actually studying the Bible, because the people that understand that context is extremely important, you're going to be the only ones that catch things like that. I was amazed. One of the first times that I ever watched Ask the Theologian, this was 5 years ago when I first started watching it. It was strange to me because I was thinking, who even thinks to think of those questions? Those questions are just so, they seemed to have been so random, off the wall. And why would you even be reading these books and drawing these connections or trying to put these two things together? But once you start really studying the Bible and caring about context, giving interest to those things, you're going to start noticing those little indications here and there that kind of allude to something else, and you'll start connecting and drawing those dots. So continue to draw those connections and work on that. It's interesting nonetheless. And like I said, the whole idea about what Jesus wrote, at least you have something that's better than what most pastors will spew out. All right, let's see here. Any more theology questions? I'll give you just a moment while I do that, and then I've got another topic that I can start discussing for you. I'll remind you that if you don't normally watch, normally we do Theology Thursday, and the whole show is just dedicated to answering theology questions. But because of the 4th of July, I'm trying to do some Q&A today for you as well, in addition to maybe touching on some topics that you may be curious about or want to know. So I'm giving you all just a little bit of time to put your thoughts together if there is anything else that you would like to know about. Any other questions that you may have? Okay, so while I'm waiting to see if any of you have any more questions, allow me to discuss the cognitive decline of our president. So the media really got a black eye when Biden came out and performed so badly in that debate. We finally caught them. They had been lying for a long time, saying that, oh, don't believe your lying eyes, don't believe the videos that you've seen, the very quotes from Biden in which he is not being able to articulate himself, put words together that form a coherent sentence. and ignore the fact that he always looks extremely tired, like he needs a nap, that he is too old for the job, unfit to carry out his presidential duties. Don't believe the lies from the right-wing media. But when people saw it live on the debate, Joe Biden with no teleprompter and probably not under the influence of whatever medications he had for the State of the Union address, the media became extremely embarrassed because they realized they were caught. They had been kidding themselves, maybe even for a while. They probably believed themselves. They may have believed themselves that, oh, they're just taking Biden out of context when he opens his mouth and says garbled babblings that no one can discern of between that and the sound of a garbage disposal. We just don't know we don't know what they're talking about. It's all lies. It's all deceit. They're just trying to make Biden look bad. Now, maybe some of them were truly knowledgeable about how bad it was. I think there really were some genuine liars. They knew. They were not so blinded by their own partisan bias that they could see what Biden truly was and how degraded his abilities and functioning is at this time. And now they are really in a state of having to be honest and admit the truth. And it makes them look really bad. It makes them look like they really are the liars that they were. And this is what happens when you ignore the problems. They are so desperate to hold on to their power, they were willing to ignore all of the problems. This is something that you see. Pointing out the flaws of a candidate is a politician is much more common on the right side of the aisle. I can name a whole bunch of things that the Republicans do, conservatives do, that frustrates me to no end. And yet the Democratic Party, they are often so good about at least being cohesive, but because they ignore the problems over and over and over again, they really can give themselves a black eye when finally the chickens come home to roost and you can see what we've all known for so long, and it's undeniable. And they are in a damage control mode right now. They are trying to figure out how to limp Biden across the finish line. He's not stepping down. The Biden family's going nowhere. And they don't want Kamala Harris to be the VP. They maybe would like somebody else to be the VP, but it's not like any of them are doing any better against Trump in a national poll. There's not some candidate who is blowing everybody else out of the water. They really are stuck with this guy because they've lied and lied and lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. What they should have done if they were really being smart, even though Kamala Harris is extremely unpopular, Biden probably should have stepped down after his second year. He probably should have stepped down and said, now's the time. We need a younger generation to take over. I am going to hand my presidency over to Kamala Harris. But he couldn't do it. And so here they are because they've ignored their problems all this time. They're in this situation. Now, we're going to see how everything plays out. But the media, it's amazing to see the articles on CNN, to see the articles on these major news networks. And they are finally admitting the truth, admitting that quiet part out loud. This reminds me of the state of Christianity. Just as the Democratic Party and the media have ignored the problems all this time, Christianity has ignored a lot of its theology problems. We have allowed weak doctrine to dominate our churches, our big conventions, denominations, seminaries, you name it. And as a result, I think we are starting to see, and will see much more, people calling our bluff and realizing that Christianity as it stands today has a lot of problems. I mean, has a lot of serious issues. The fact that Old Testament prophecy is so weakened and undermined by covenant theology. Old Testament prophecy is truly undone and made voided by the spiritualization of the kingdom, the replacement doctrine with the nation of Israel. It has undermined the Bible so severely that people who are truly observant, the intellectual people, are going to look at the standard doctrine being taught today by Christianity, by theologians, by professors, by preachers, and they're going to realize that it is an indefensible position. And you can only get away with it for so long. The Calvinists can only get away with their bad theology for so long. Weak evangelicalism can only get away with it for so long. Eventually, people are going to want answers. The evangelicals don't have them. They'll just say, we'll all figure it out once we get to heaven. The Calvinist will try to answer some questions, but it's kind of like listening to a politician, especially like Joe Biden, answer a question. It may sound like an answer at first, but then if you think about it for 3 seconds, it doesn't work. That's how Calvinism is. Calvinism is very logical for the first 5 seconds until you give it any more deeper thought, and then it starts to fall apart entirely. And it creates a monster of God. God becomes a sick, twisted deity that takes delight in people being judged forever and never being given an opportunity. It truly does make God out to be a monster. And if it was not for coming across rightly dividing the Bible, it's not that I would have walked away from faith, but I would have forever lived in a state of great frustration with, or I'll say this, a lack of contentment with Bible teaching. Because I had always felt a lack of contentment with what I was being taught. I couldn't quite pinpoint what was wrong. The Calvinist, I never disagreed with them, or I never agreed with them on the matters of election for individuals, but I did appreciate their willingness to try to give real answers, at least on the surface, what seemed like real answers. So I appreciated the Calvinists for trying to answer questions, even though I never could get on board with their election doctrine. The standard evangelical approach, I never was satisfied with them because they never had any kind of answers. And so I really was in a state, before I came to understanding the importance of rightly dividing the Bible, of just being frustrated. It seemed like whatever preacher I listened to, they always left something lacking. I would find the older preachers much more palatable, and I could appreciate them a little bit more than the modern ones. But I could tell that there's just something about how we're going about this that is really lacking. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I had issues with the Sermon on the Mount, and I didn't know how to articulate that, because the Sermon on the Mount I could tell was works-based. And I also had issue with Hebrews, because Hebrews sounded very much works-based in a lot of ways, and at the same time, the idea of losing salvation was very abundantly clear in Hebrews, and I didn't appreciate how nobody could answer the question. There are more people that are like that. And I think that what people are going to get to is either you throw the whole thing out, Calvinism, evangelicalism, all of it's so weak, and you throw it out, or you rightly divide it. And hopefully that's what we can do. We can provide people with good, sound sources of Bible doctrine so they can, in fact, be able to stand on the Bible. And once again, that's what happens. You cannot ignore the problems. If problems exist, you have to address it, whether it's marriage or your church or your family or theology, you name it. If there is a serious problem, you have to be willing to talk about it. Otherwise, it's just going to grow and it's going to weaken our hopes of defending the faith and providing good, sound Bible teaching to people. So those are my thoughts on that. Let's not be like the Democrats and pretend like the president is not senile. Let's not look at Christianity today as it stands and not pretend like it is extremely confused and desperately needs to get its theology figured out. Because as it stands right now, our theology is so messed up in much of the Christian world. So what is the answer? The answer is rightly dividing the Bible. We have to take it literally, grammatically, historically, contextually. We have to understand what was for the nation of Israel. We have to understand what is for the body of Christ, that Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles. We need to look to his books for our doctrine. That doesn't mean we neglect the Bible. I defy anybody who says that a right divider neglects the rest of Scripture. We dedicate great amounts of time to studying the Word of God. Plain and simple. So with that, I've been going kind of long today. It's 10:45. I know we had a hiccup at the beginning, and we had to get restarted. But there you go. Answered a couple questions today. Good questions. I appreciate each and every one of you. We do have the Book of Life up on the, not the Book of Life, but a sermon on the Book of Life on YouTube for you to watch. We'll get more content out to you tonight. I'm going to be teaching over Philippians, session number 6. And so appreciate each and every one of you. If you have any comments, be sure to let me know. You can contact me at my website. We have a link there for the email address. And thank you all so much. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today to answer some Bible questions, also to discuss matters of politics, culture, society, you name it. And this has been Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I am Pastor Mark Baze. You can find my resources at markbazeministries.org. Take care. Have a happy 4th of July. We'll see you next time.